This is from the CBC. Since the 60s, countercultures have subverted mainstream tech to connect and build community. The Macintosh computer was considered the new LSD. Although hippies rejected the military-industrial complex, many embraced the idea of the world in which material reality could be imagined as an information system. And so this article talks about, in particular, Silicon Valley. In the 60s, says Professor Fred Turner, a professor of communications at Stanford University, we had the Vietnam War, we had civil rights, we had enormous conflicts, and particularly college students growing up in that period did not want to grow up to fight the Vietnam War and did not want to grow up to be the kind of people that would prosecute that kind of a war. Meantime, though, they didn't want to let go of the beautiful technologies and the kind of utopian dreams that the industrial complex had also brought about. And at the same time, the family was being deconstructed, and you had the feminist movement starting to come into full force. You had all kinds of other ideologies that were starting to break out as a result of, the psychedelic movements around the time. That's why they talked about like the hippies around that time, and so on and so forth. They were meant to create a kind of disembodiment where people were interconnected and at peace and didn't get trapped in conflict. And so he goes on to talk about how there was this kind of like opposing, like kind of cognitive dissonance in people's brains. On the one hand, we like what technology can do for us and can kind of bring us into. And, the reason why is because, well, it kind of aligns with our, everybody's an interchangeable widget kind of a thing, and we can live in peace together, etc. Now, as it so happens, there's a counterculture that starts to stand up, and the counterculture starts to try and create their own little ecosystem to prove that something is true. Like this one. This was one of the first technocratic countercultures, where the people got together and said, hey, we can do this. F everybody else, we can do this. And you can see the kind of counterculture that stands up. It seems to have started as a result of 60s and 70s from people who were kind of like, let's say, more on that general aspect of beliefs and cultural background, where they believe in the fluidity of gender and things like this. And so they start adopting technological frameworks as a mechanism by which to employ control and create a counterculture. Okay, we have this article, 1960s Counterculture and Personal Computing. So he talks about the same thing here. We have the Vietnam War. It ignited counterculture movements. Then you have ARPANET, which conveniently comes online at the time. And then you have LSD and ARPANET having substantial ties to government funding and research. We've already covered this. We've already covered how people with this kind of ideological background primarily were the ones who pushed for the creation and the use of technological improvements for a variety of different reasons, and they were indeed funded by the government. Okay, both exploded as potential tools to gain advantage during the Cold War. In cities like San Francisco and New York, the CIA established secret locations known as safe houses where LSD experiments would be conducted. And so we kind of know about this kind of stuff. I don't really need to get into that too much. However, this is something very interesting. Early computer pioneers like Douglas Engelbart were inspired by the idea of expanding their minds. Engelbart was influenced by Vannevar Bush, who talked about a Memex machine to store and find information easily back in 1945. The Memex, short for memory extender, was envisioned as a device that would augment an individual's memory by making it easy to store, categorize, and retrieve information. Engelbart amazed people in 1968 with his mother of all demos, showing off things like the computer mouse, graphical user interfaces, hypertext, video conferencing, and collaborative computing. Engelbart's work at the Stanford Research Institute inevitably connected him to various government-funded projects. However, there's no evidence to suggest a direct personal involvement with the CIA or covert or operations. There are accounts of Engelbart experimenting with LSD under sanctioned experiments at the SRI, but it was mostly exploring potential to enhance creativity and problem solving. We have Engelbart here with the mother of all demos. Here he is practicing for it. And you can see the first mouse as designed by Bill English and Douglas Engelbart. Imagine this. Imagine this is your mouse. Check it, boys. Look at that. Look at the first mouse. Okay. And so we have kind of like the opening door, right, at the late 1960s of the creation of like the computers as we know them today. However, Steve Jobs did experiment with LSD. He said so in his own biography, and several others apparently have as well. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there seems to be an overlap between people who hold these kinds of ideologies and have these kinds of backgrounds where they experiment in, say, like more non-theistic backgrounds, the worship of Lucifer, etc. Not completely. There are others of Christian backgrounds. We'll get into that. Don't worry. But at this point in time, it seems that the kind of people who have primarily held the reins of this type of movement are people who experiment with psychedelics and have these kinds of like, hey man, spirituality sucks, man. Don't be spiritual, man. God sucks, man. Family sucks, man. We're all the same, man. We're no different than a computer, man. And they experiment with stuff, and then they get ingrained into the scientific community. They get ingrained into the technical community. They start building machines, and the reason why they start building machines looks very fucking suspicious when you start thinking about why a technocratic system would need a bunch of machines. And lo and behold, the people who love technocracy build the machines that help them create the system that they want to build. Like, it starts to look super sketch, right?